All right, what's up, everybody? We're live again for the Tight 10. Let me get going on catching you up with all the latest news. All right, so we left off at June 19th, long time ago. One of the big things that have come out, there's been a constant drumbeat on this specific topic, but there was an article from Joseph Hoyt that talked about the Cowboys' RB2 role between Phil Maffa and Jaydon Blue. It said, there's a chance they aren't competing against each other per se, but rather trying to cement their own places in the backfield. That's pretty much suggesting that Jaydon Blue and Phil Maffa are truly going to be somewhat complementary. If Javonte Williams were to get hurt, I would expect Phil Maffa to do kind of the A and B gap runs up the middle, and Jaydon Blue to do the C and D gap runs, along with the pass catching role for Jaydon Blue. More on Kenny Gainwell and Bucky Irving's backfield split. Again, it really does sound like Kenny Gainwell is going to be the 1B to Bucky Irving's 1A that is different and more elevated than what Rachaad White was to Bucky Irving. I've talked a lot about this topic. There's been injury concerns with Bucky. There's mental health concerns with Bucky. They're expecting a tighter split. My personal perspective, I'd rather choose Kenneth Gainwell because I think the price is cheaper, and I think they're going to go with hot hand. And I do think Kenny Gainwell is a worthy running back as a rusher, not just a pass catcher. There was some discussion about the Falcons wide receivers. Zachariah Branch looks more than just a screen merchant. We'll see how that actually plays out, but he's shown a lot of juice and yak in camp. Jahan Dotson, they like using him in a versatile role, can play slot or outside, which I think helps Zachariah Branch, who might play more slot. So if Jahan Dotson can fulfill the outside role, that's great. And then Zacchaeus seems like he is a vet who can step in as a wide receiver 4. The Cardinals' starting offense was listed in 12 personnel, which means that they would have 2 tight ends and 2 wide receivers on the field. That should help Marvin Harrison, Michael Wilson, and Trey McBride and Jeremiah Love all have stronger target shares. There was some optimism of Mark Andrews in the new system, which they're expecting to be more 3 wide receiver sets. Again, if Mark Andrews is just going to be the only tight end on the team, which we don't know yet because there's still opportunities for guys like Darren Waller or someone else to get signed, he will be a really strong pick at his current ADP. The Jaguars starting offense, the way that it was listed by John Shipley, was Trevor Lawrence at quarterback, Bashal Tutin at running back, which he's saying is still questionable. Brian Thomas at the X doing the vertical role, as we continually see and hear. Jacoby Myers at the Z, and the slot being Parker Washington with Travis Hunter as the backup there, with Brenton Strange at tight end. Okay, so I had a big post on this, and I keep talking about this on Twitter these days. But one of the big things that I've learned through my own data analysis and data science work is that running back volume, which is largely what predicts fantasy points, the biggest predictor of running back volume is previous season volume. So literally, if you were able to carry a big load in previous seasons, you are going to have greater strength in carrying a big load in the future season. Efficiency stats are very marginal signals. So like if a guy is really good at success rate or explosive runs or something like that, doesn't hold that much water. And what that means to me is really just people are really down on guys like RJ Harvey, which includes myself, Omarion Hampton, and other running backs who just didn't have strong success efficiency metrics, but it just doesn't matter. Really, there's like almost like a bare minimum you maybe have to hit, and all these guys generally hit it. So there's a lot of value, in my opinion, to attacking players that people are saying have low efficiency, especially if, the next year when people are kind of questionable about what that backfield is going to look like. Isaiah Bond has been practicing with the first team offense all spring, and he's going to likely rotate and mix in with Jerry Jeudy and Denzel Boston and Casey Concepcion. So it's like a 4 wide receiver, just kind of like rotation. Michael Mayer, I think, is going to be a factor, and he's going to be too good to not be on the field for the the Raiders. Very good contingency bet if you want a handcuff tight end. Probably the only handcuff tight end I see out there. Some information on Travion Henderson. It's a fan site, but they actually interviewed like somebody who's plugged in with the team. So take this with a grain of salt. It doesn't appear that he will be running back one right now, which shouldn't be viewed as a controversial point. Henderson had some breakout games, like one against the Bills, but the inconsistency from the offensive line didn't allow the running backs, especially Henderson, to showcase what they could do under the best circumstances. So it seems safer to keep him as the RB2 for now, with plans to eventually take over as the starter this season or next. Take that as you will. Broncos want to be more effective running the ball, and it's a really big priority for Sean Payton. They want to be more under center, and they have J.K. Dobbins as their lead back, R.J. Harvey is their number 2 and pass catching back, and Jonah Coleman third down back. And they believe he can help in the run game a little bit too, kind of in a Tyler Beatty type of role, maybe a couple carries a game. Jaylen Waddle talk, he's making every route look the exact same. So the way he does his breaks and stems and all sorts of different stuff, he is making them look very similar. The team will use him in ways where he can take short passes into significant gains. They're probably too optimistic, but says they should target him 10 times a game and use him on quick slants and send him deep a few times to keep the defense on their toes. That is a very strong fantasy role. Cowboys camp thoughts from the Dallas Morning News. Ryan Flournoy was the offensive MVP in camp, and Caleb Downs is as advertised. Some more on the defense. I'm not going to go over that. Those are just for Twitter. Travion Henderson notes, says he needs to be more consistent to alleviate Ramondre's workload, needs to be a better pass protector, has to have better vision between the tackles. Again, I think this comes back to the efficiency angle that I said before. And now maybe Vrabel plays a little bit like both sides of this, but I do think that there's some like world where, we all don't like the Travion Henderson ADP, but you can't not take the guy because his profile is so strong. It's exactly what you kind of want, an explosive player who catches passes. And so you have to mix him in if you're doing a portfolio. In a redraft league, he wouldn't be a target of mine. Efton Chisholm could play the slot over Pop Douglas. There's definitely a little bit of a competition there. The Saints want to keep Alvin Kamara around, but they just got to agree on a contract. Xavier Legette could end up as the wide receiver 5, but he's competing for wide receiver 4. Chris Brazzell is potentially the wide receiver 3, and Legette is feeling the pressure with Jimmy Horn potentially being the wide receiver 4. We will see how that plays out. Okay. Chris Olave had a blood clot that kept him out of practices for OTAs and minicamp. He is now cleared per this report from ESPN, and then another report in the future that happened from Albert Breer that said he's cleared. He is going to California to practice with Tyler Shuck and 17 other teammates after minicamp. They are going to practice and get better. I see this as a sign of relief, and you can just continue to draft him if you like him. Eli Heidenreich could potentially make the roster, mainly because of special teams. And there's other stuff on him too. He's got a good chance to make the roster. The Falcons had a kind of like depth chart reveal that happened through a reporter, and it said Tua would be the starting quarterback, which is what I expect to happen. The running back is Bijan with Brian Robinson as the backup, clear handcuff there. Starting wide receivers are Drake London and Jahan Dotson with Olamide Zaccheaus and Zachariah Branch rotating in. And there's 2 starting tight ends because they'll be in 12 personnel a lot this season. Kyle Pitts and Charlie Warner. Having Charlie Warner on the field is going to boost, and Jahan Dotson is going to boost so much around Drake London and Kyle Pitts and Bijan Robinson. I had this interesting graphic on the Patriots and how they kind of operated their offense, but you can see that Ramondre, who had all the touches in the playoffs, is the top line, and Travion is the bottom line. Ramondre got hurt, so he missed a few weeks, and then they kind of rode Travion until the playoffs. And then when the playoffs hit, they went back into the Ramondre zone. That is kind of the takeaway for right now. There's potentially some opportunity for Travion to work his way back into that strong mix, but as of right now, it looks like it's going to be Ramondre as the more dominant running back to start. Jackson Dart has a new staff full of former head coaches and offensive coordinators. They're asking him to pick up a new system and want him to be smarter with his decision-making as a rusher. They are uncertain how this will impact his rushing metrics, but it's a topic of conversation with coaches. Tanner Koziol, there's a lot of hype on him. He's probably not going to play very much only because he's behind Brenton Strange and they have a lot of receivers, but it's nice to hear that he continually has good practices, something to keep in mind in case Brenton Strange gets hurt in the future. The offseason distractions for the Cowboys are non-existent for the first time in a long time. That's huge for the team. Bashal Tutin. He was the 11th most important Jaguar for 2026 per John Shipley. The Jaguars did sign veteran free agent Chris Rodriguez, who will do his own fair share of replacing H-Han's touches in the Jaguars running game, but Tutin has more of a three-down skill set that is closer to what H-Han did a year ago. I completely agree. I think this is going to be primarily a Bashal Tutin backfield. I think the Jones fracture for Chris Rodriguez, could be Jones fracture. I'm not going to reveal anything. I think that's going to be huge, and we see people take a big step back in terms of efficiency and what they can do when they have injuries like that. I am very worried for Chris Rodriguez. Trey Tucker has toughness and speed and has caught the eye of the new coach and could lead the team with having a career season. He had roughly 700 yards in 2025, so career year is definitely plausible. Very good pick at his cost at the moment. More on Phil Maffa. Maffa and Jaydon Blue have been getting more reps with the starters in Cowboys training camp or minicamp and OTAs. The Cowboys coaching staff may view Maffa as the best best suited to back up Javonte Williams, thanks to his size and physical running style. It will be up to Maffa to prove it on the field and take control of the RB2 spot. Again, it's going to be a split, and he will play a lot of the Javonte Williams kind of up the middle type of role. There's belief that Chig Okonkwo could be used in a Sam Laporta role, and they don't need to have a wide receiver too because Chig and Rachaad White can do a lot of the backfield and from the tight end slot. Bo Nix doesn't plan on being limited at all. Though for those who are worried about his injury, he has no limp. He's doing nothing different than he normally would. He is totally fine. He said he's not going to be limited with mobility. He has plenty of time to continually get healthy. He was fully cleared to participate, and he's going to be fully baked into training camp. So not worried about him at all. Josh Downs putting in extra work for more snaps and the workload he's going to take on in 2026. So again, Bo Nix fully healthy, no mobility issues. Jalen Waddle, it's hard to say the addition of wide receiver Jalen Waddle won't have the most noticeable impact. Waddle, who has wowed his teammates in offseason work, will be a high volume target and is expected to boost a treble spot. On Jonah Coleman, they said the Broncos have Dobbins at the top of the depth chart with RJ Harvey as well, but Coleman has already shown he belongs in the rotation. I think he will have a small role in the rotation to start, and by the end of the season, we will see how things play out, but I do think that J.K. Dobbins, early season at least, is going to have a lion's share of the carries. Patrick Mahomes is going to be cleared for 11-on-11 at training camp and hopes to play in the first preseason game. And the top three wide receivers for the Chiefs are Rashee Rice, Xavier Worthy, and Tyquan Thornton. The Patriots could keep 7 wide receivers on their roster. Kayshon Boutte still on the trade block, and Kyle Williams needs to be more than a deep threat. He did not rotate very much with the first team. He was mainly with the second team. So maybe the bags are packed for Kyle Williams, who is really just ran wind sprints last year. Pop Douglas and Efton Chisholm are battling for the slot role, which we heard earlier. Dan Quinn said the run game might not have one player, but will utilize individual strengths in different situations. That sounds like a very big committee, which is what we expect. And the Commanders' wide receiver 2 situation, it was evident this spring who it might be. But as with running back, it could be a group assignment unless it wasn't evident, this spring who it might be. But they could add a veteran such as Stephon Diggs or Brandon Ayuk. Notable because Stephon Diggs is working out at University of Maryland, which is close by. And Ayuk continually posts on Instagram that he wants to be a part of the team, essentially. And Chig won't be the only tight end involved in the pass game. They're going to do a lot of 12 personnel with Ben Sinnott. Happy Father's Day. I missed that for most people. Egbuka felt worn down at the end of the season last year, and now he is feeling better and optimistic for 2026. Good to hear that he feels healthy. The 49ers running back room, the 49ers didn't want to sub out Christian McCaffrey because of the lack of versatility behind him. The running backs did not have the ability to run routes, run the ball, and do pass pro, and now they feel as though Kalen Black and Jordan James are able to do that after a year of learning for Jordan James and what they liked to see from Kalen Black. Dejon Stripling is competing for the F/slot role, but the belief is he'll play a lot and eventually start. He'll make a bigger impact than you expect this season. Maybe not right away, but by the end of the season, he will probably be a starter. Some good content that I keep reading about all throughout. I'm just going over the biggest notes. SI, which a lot of people are kind of dogging a little bit, but there's some writers that are actually like plugged in with the team. For the Dolphins, the SI writer wrote, there's a big role for Caleb Douglas with outside possibilities for Kevin Coleman Jr. and Chris Bell if Chris Bell is healthy. The Ravens' projected depth chart is Lamar Jackson with Derrick Henry as the running back and Justice Hill as the RB2 with Adam Randall as the RB3, though that's a competition with Rasheen Ali. Starting wide receivers are Zay Flowers, Rashad Bateman, and Devontae Walker with backups Elijah Surratt and Jacoby Lane. I think that wide receiver 3 role is up for grabs, but Rashad Bateman is pretty much locked into that top 2 wide receiver role. And starting. And then the tight end is Mark Andrews, which we all knew and expected. Travis Hunter is going to play both ways, but we won't know his role for a while. Everyone wants to know which receiver is the alpha, and Shipley argues it's best if they just spread the ball around. The tight end room is getting better and will factor into personnel, adding more pressure for playing time between who the eligible 5 pass catchers are. So that means if there's only 5 on the field, if they have another tight end, that means they take a receiver out. Which receiver is coming off the field? We will see. I am very scared about the Titans' offensive line. It is very questionable. There was an article that suggested that Wan'Dale Robinson will be the top weapon for the Titans this year, and I completely agree that that's probably going to be the case, mainly because of the offensive line and what I think that's going to not allow Cam Ward to do, which is throw the ball deeper down the field. I need to hit up this Josh Downs news. Where is it? I'm just going to go to my original tweet first. Big Josh Downs update. So essentially they said that Josh Downs was seen on the outside plenty of times at mandatory minicamp making plays no matter which quarterback was directing the offense. The big TLDR is that Josh Downs is having the opportunity to showcase that he can play on the outside, especially with Alec Pierce being out and the fact that they don't have another veteran. They could sign a veteran. That has been something that's been reported. But at the moment, there is not a veteran on the team, and so Josh Downs is likely to play on the outside, or at least has the opportunity to do so this season, which is huge for everybody. There's a lot of tweets and follow-up about this. Okay, so my other thing was that a week before that message, there was a note in ESPN that said that the Colts could look into signing a veteran free agent, and the names that popped up were Keenan Allen and Deebo Samuel. I said Keenan Allen's primary slot, but actually last year he played a little bit more on the outside so that Ladd could play the slot. It's not the best role for him, but it is what ended up happening. There's a chance that there's another receiver added to the room, so we'll take it with a little bit of a caveat. Let's see. So there was a report from an insider for the Titans that said Ridley won't be handed the wide receiver 3 in the Titans offense. Poor production, age, and then Almanor and DK being people that they want to get involved as well. So it's a competition that'll play out in training camp and probably through the season. And if the Titans aren't playoff bound, in my opinion, what's going to end up happening is Ridley's probably not going to play. We see these things happen with receivers. When they fall off really hard. Brandon Ayuk's been crazy. We had a bunch of Broncos on a boat recently. RJ Harvey was there, but Coleman and Dobbins were not. Cortland Sutton was there, but Jalen Waddle was not, and Evan Ingram was there. I wouldn't read into that at all. Tyquan Thornton was listed as the 22nd most important Chiefs player and clear wide receiver 3 for the team. Some speculation about Quentin Johnston and the fact that he will change to a more yak-heavy role, which would be very different from his deep-heavy role that he had last year. So that could be very interesting for him. The Giants' schematic confirmation, basically they're going to be doing a lot of 12 and 13 personnel, which would be very good for Isaiah Likely and Theo Johnson. Some spring surprises from ESPN. I may not hit on all of these players, but Greg Dulcich was the primary target and has clear trust with Malik Willis. Adonai Mitchell has chemistry with Geno and took a big leap over the offseason. Isaiah Bond was targeted the most during spring and showed good speed. Brian Thomas has chemistry with Trevor Lawrence, especially deep, and is no longer injured. Ryan Flournoy, the Cowboys trust him, and he's working a little bit in the slot. Rachaad White looked great catching passes, and they won't know about him as a runner until the summer. Davion Thomas showed that he can do more than special teams. Isaac Tesla, ready to be more involved. Chris Brazzell was an impact player this spring. Bryce Lance, lots of reps because wide receivers were injured and looked good with Shuck and Rattler. Tez Johnson stood out amongst all the wide receivers for the Bucs. He's still practicing with the second team, however. People in the Rams building believe Terrence Ferguson will take a big step forward, and George Holani got the first crack with the first team in all practices and is squarely in the backfield plans. That could be a pass catching role, but nonetheless important. We'll keep moving along. Again, with the Colts from The Athletic, they said that they could be looking into adding a receiver, specifically Keenan Allen mentioned again. So interesting there, especially as we're thinking about what we could do with Josh Downs. It was mentioned in the context of, hey, they need somebody to potentially get them by while Alec Pierce is recovering. Albert Breer mentioned that Patrick Mahomes will be cleared for full practice soon, and he should be good for week 1. Xavier Worthy bulked up. Emmett Johnson and Cyrus Allen flashed at minicamp. Another thing Breer said was that Denzel Boston is very impressive, and he's been really impressive in camp. I actually think he's going to play more than KC Conception this season, just based off the fact that they really like him at outside receiver. Breer on the Chargers, he basically mentioned that Harbaugh has a history of developing strong tight ends dating back to Stanford, the 49ers, and Michigan. Names like Kobe Fleener, Zach Ertz, Vernon Davis, Delaney Walker, AJ Barner, and Colston Loveland. You can't argue that that's been a focal point in his offenses. And he now has the tight end room that he wants. He's got Kolar to be the blocking inline guy, Njoku to do the inline and F stuff, and then Oronde Gadsden to do the other F work. Albert Breer has Jaydon Higgins as his breakout player for the Houston Texans. He impressed in the spring, and one staffer at Sports Illustrated, one staffer for the Texans illustrated it as having a power forward in Collins and small forward in Jaydon Higgins at the position. A.D. Mitchell, continually hearing great things about him with Geno Smith. Keep hearing things about the Seattle Seahawks doing a little bit of a running back by committee with George Holani and Jadarian Price splitting. A lot of stuff here. Jalen Waddle looks incredible. Lamar Jackson and Declan Doyle are in sync. Caleb Williams and Ben Johnson are on the same page. Colts could add Keenan Allen for the third time this has been mentioned. Trevor Lawrence is comfortable in Cohen's scheme. Cousins is probably going to start for the Raiders over Mendoza to start the season. Cam Ward missed easy passes in spring and last year, and he's working on mechanics. Chigakonkwo was impressive, and there's a competition at running back and wide receiver for the Commanders. The Bucs are going to do a little bit more. So they went 12 personnel heavy in 2025 due to necessity/roster, but would not expect the same in 2026 due to better wide receiver depth for the Bucs this year. There's no trade for Shedeur Sanders that's going to happen. Sean Payton prioritized J.K. Dobbins in free agency above all others. So any other player that they were going to sign, they wanted him first. And they made that happen. It was a promise that Sean Payton made to J.K. Dobbins, and they made it happen. Chris Olave participating in this quarterback wide receiver retreat with Tyler Shuck, again, confirming that he is healthy and fine and cleared off of blood clots. Quentin Johnson talked about how he was more of a yards after catch guy in college, so he's clearly self-scouted himself and that he's really excited about his new role, which is going to be more of that this season. He could be a Debo-esque player, with Lab being more of the Brandon Ayuk in the offense, man versus zone kind of splits that we could see this season. Buffalo traded for DJ Moore to solve their man coverage issues and hope he can be the answer. Likely going to be a big rotation at wide receiver 3 for the Broncos between Pat Bryant, Marvin Mims, and Troy Franklin. $53-man roster projection for the Chiefs. We have Amari DeMarcado and Emmett Johnson making the team with Brashard Smith, who's only going to make it for special teams. We have Rashee Rice, Xavier Worthy, Tyquan Thornton, Jalen Royals, Cyrus Allen, and Andrew Armstrong. And then Travis Kelce, Noah Gray, Jared Wiley, and Trey Watson. So no surprises on that. The Commanders asked Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, Bill, to get bigger, and he did that. But he wasn't able to show whether or not he was better in the pass game. He'll be able to and pass pro, and he will get that opportunity in training camp. They're expecting some sort of committee, but they're going to give Bill every opportunity to earn that big role, and it's up to him to be able to seize that opportunity. Brian Robinson is the clear handcuff to Bijan Robinson, and they keep mentioning this Tyler Algier role, which I don't actually believe, but it is what is being reported. Parker Washington will be a key player as the starting slot with the ability to play outside for the Jaguars. With his ability, this is the quote from John Shipley, with his ability to play outside and in the slot, win win with the ball in his hands and at the catch point in the middle of the field and as a vertical threat, it is hard to think of what Washington can't do. Really strong words. This was interesting. So the Jets want to see what they have in Geno Smith and fourth rounder Cade Klubnik. So I'm a little bit worried about Cade Klubnik getting a shot this season more than I was earlier, especially with Geno's kind of infractions that may come up, may not. I'm just a little bit worried that we could see some Cade Klubnik, which would just tank the value of all the Jets players at the end of the season. Trevor Lawrence had a pretty much clean offseason. There was another report about that today. Basically, the whole team is back. He's not learning a new system. He's not working on mechanics. He's not working on anything. He is just free to operate. And this is the first time in his 6-year career that this is happening. And he is excited, and there is a lot of reasons to be bullish on him. Sam Laporta is healthy. There is no reason to be worried about him going into the season. Great stuff to hear on Jalen Coker, but he is changing his diet and his focusing on his health so that he doesn't have soft tissue injuries. That's important. I think that we are going to see a lot of committee work for Jatavion Sanders, but he seems healthy. And then Jonathan Brooks said there's bigger tests ahead for Jonathan Brooks, who said he still wasn't back to his top speed during OTAs. So we'll see where that trends. Cowboys running back situation, I've mentioned this plenty of times. It's basically Jaydon Blue and Phil Maffa rotating end ones. More drumbeat on Ryan Flournoy. I think he is a great pick where he is with contingent upside. I've been making a lot of points on Omarion Hampton and comparing him to Jahmyr Gibbs and Bijan Robinson in their rookie seasons, with the metrics kind of showing like, hey, he was kind of in line with all these guys. I don't personally view him as the same level of talent, but I do think that we are underrating that this guy is an elite athlete. Like all of the metrics, RAS, Spork, everything basically say like, hey, this guy is a super athlete. And we're just kind of underrating that factor and just kind of writing him off a little bit. I know he's like pick 15 right now in ADP, but I still think that we are a little bit more worried about a guy in Keaton Mitchell, where we see this profile all the time. Guys who have not had historic volumes come in and just like play their 5-6 rushing attempts per game, and that's it. And that's not that scary when it comes to fantasy projections. Brendan Sorsby is not going to be in the supplemental draft as of right now. Briere reported that Brian Thomas dealt with injuries last year. His connection with Trevor is now established, and the team was not trying to trade him. Or the team, was not trying to trade him. Travis Hunter will be a spot player on offense and focus on defense. Adonai Mitchell looks like a nice complement to Garrett Wilson. Drew Petzing's offense will mix with Ben Johnson's offense for the Lions, which is going to be interesting. And Briere believes that Jameson Williams could take the next step, saying that he has looked very good at OTAs. And then Briere confirmed again that Chris Olave was cleared of restrictions from blood clots. This was an interesting one. We can watch the video for a second, but my initial thought watching this was, man, George Kittle looks really healthy. And there's still 2.5 months until week 1. There were some comments like, hey, he's limping. Every single doctor that reviewed this tape basically said he looks healthy, that he's ahead of schedule. He has said that he is ahead of schedule and plans on playing early in the season. I think he is an absolute smash pick in where he's going right now. I am not worried about him. Modern medicine has changed. The surgery technique has changed. Achilles is not as big of a worry anymore, especially where he had his injury. Chigakonkwo. Basically, he's developing a really strong relationship with Jaden Daniels. He's been targeted a lot at training camp. I think he's going to have a stronger role route share than he's had previously in his career. He was at about a 52.5 route share in his career with a 21.1 targets per route run. I think with two tight end, it's very easy to assume that he will get close to a 70% route share at the very least, especially with the wide receiver room that they have. And so I really do think that he's a good value where he's going. I keep kind of like toggling between him and Arande Gadsden around the same role. If you just kind of like put him at a 70% route share, you're going to get like 700, 800 yards, which is really good for a guy that's going at like 145 right now. This was kind of breaking news that I like saw in the back of a video that Darren Waller was at tight end U, and then I kind of like Googled him a little bit, saw an article that said he did an interview. Then I went and reviewed the interview, and basically he said that he's been training every single day after the Super Bowl, 5 days a week, nonstop, and that he's basically coming back, wants to play for a team. He can ruin so many tight end rooms. I think Denver would be the most interesting. I also think that the Ravens are alive to wanting another tight end out there. We'll see where that goes. He did say he wants to go to a contender. That doesn't mean that it'll actually happen. There needs to be interest from the team, but very interesting nonetheless. Albert Breer and Connor Orr had Omarion Hampton and Jaden Higgins as their breakout players. Again, Hampton. Marshawn Lloyd could be the change of pace number 2 back, and it seems consistent across platforms that the team is cautiously optimistic, but needs him to prove it. It sounds very similar to Jaydon Blue, where it's like, hey, this guy needs to stay healthy. For Jaydon Blue, it was this guy needs to mature. These guys do those things. They stay healthy. They mature. They have a role. If they don't, they won't. Charlie Kolar was listed as the 14th most important Chargers player this season. They said he offers more than just run blocking, has untapped pass catching potential. They think he has good upside, etc. It does make me a little bit more worried about Arande Gadsden, but at Arande Gadsden's current price, I feel like you're not really like losing out on too much. So I'm still okay taking him, especially if they get down in a game. You're going to see more Gadsden running out there and running routes and can generate some spike weeks. We saw some upside that is hard to recreate where he's going right now. Quentin Johnston listed as the 15th most important Charger. And I kind of mentioned this, but this yak heavy role that they're talking about, like his metrics within for passes within 2.5 seconds are very similar to Ladd's, mainly better. And so it's just one of those things, like they want to get the ball out quick. Quentin Johnston is a good yak player when they do stuff like that. I think that there's opportunity and upside for Quentin Johnston to be, which Scott Barrett said, in a Debo-esque role for the Chargers. Keep seeing everything point to the fact that Brian Thomas is mentioned as a deep threat and vertical receiver for the offense. I do not think that is a good thing for him in fantasy terms. Keon Coleman's role is very undefined, and we are kind of unsure to see like what his role will be, because it sounds like everything's going to be determined in training camp for him. And even if he does well in training camp, that doesn't mean that he'll have a role late in the season, as we saw last year where he had a good training camp, quote unquote, but then ended up kind of fading away during the season and getting basically benched. Brenton Strange had got his extension. He had an elite receiver score in my receiver score metric that I created. I think he's a great player in general. That doesn't mean he's going to be an incredible fantasy asset, but he may have some good weeks for you. Contract extensions. I may not go into this, less fantasy relevant. Yeah, I don't think I'm going to do that one. I thought it was interesting. So I was reading The Athletic, and the Bears beat reporter was saying that, you know, he just listed like Roma Dunes as a question in terms of what they want to see in training camp. And they talked about his explosion. And the only quote that I've seen out there about Roma Dunes looking good at training camp is from Ben Johnson. And I think that coaches like tend to not like, they're not going to speak badly about a player, but then we see the Clay Harbor reports, and then this kind of pops up. I'm a little worried as to what may happen with Roma Dunes. Brenton Strange got his deal, and we think that Parker Washington will get his soon. Offensive line ratings with Mike Clay and Sharp Football. The Titans are kind of at the bottom here. I am very worried about their offensive line for Cam Ward. The Bengals are likely going to do more. They're trying to practice more under center play action plays so they can get more easy explosives. And then the return of Eric All makes this all possible. They're talking about how he is the versatile tight end that could unlock all of this for them. Again, George Kittle is probably going to be fine for the regular season. Maybe misses week 1 just because of where the game is being played in Australia. John Shipley had a report where he said that he thinks that Parker Washington will lead the team in receptions and yards and Brian Thomas in touchdowns. I don't think there's anything to take away from that other than the fact that that probably means that Parker Washington is playing a lot to get those targets and yards. The Falcons did a lot of evaluation on Kyle Pitts before giving him an extension. I think this is really interesting, probably underrated in some ways, but it sounds like they were finding ways to they're really wanting to find ways to get him involved in a versatile kind of role. And I'm like very bullish on the fact that he's not going to have any route share issues and a top 2 target on this team. I think that there's good opportunity with where he's being slotted right now, as long as Tua is quarterback. The Cleveland Browns article said that Casey Conception and Denzel Boston will be involved early in the season, and that Isaiah Bond is poised to take a step forward. I just think we talked about this before, but there's going to be a big mix between all of those receivers at the beginning of the season. Mike Florio does not think that Rashee Rice will be suspended. The Cardinals are going to play Carson back in 2026. I am very worried about this for fantasy for McBride, Marvin Harrison, and Michael Wilson, and what that's going to mean for them at the end of the season when the money is on the line. No major surprises on the Jets, 53-man roster. All good there. Again, Jaydon Blue, RB2. He needs to prove it. They envision him as a complement to Javonte, and Clayton Adams would like to keep his running backs fresh. I think that there is some downside to Javonte. I don't think he's going to lose his role by any means, but I do think that some snaps could be taken away. Going to be more touchdown dependent than I would like, and not as much of a pass catcher. It does feel more dead zone-y in round 3 than I would like. Terrence Ferguson was listed as a potential breakout player for the Rams. They, again, listed it as this guy's basically going to be their top pass catching tight end and wide receiver 3, essentially, for the team. The Athletic posted an article about, so this was also breakout players. They listed Blake Corum, but then they essentially wrote down that the role looks that it's going to be a 50-50 split of rushing duties, but that Kyron would have short yardage, long down and distance, and path catching. It sounds like the same as what happened at the end of the season last year. There's been some speculation on Parker Washington getting a potential extension, and it is my belief that that will probably happen within sometime before training camp. And that extension, kind of like the baseline, people are kind of thinking that extension is somewhere around the Christian Watson contract. Again, I mentioned Trevor Lawrence had a very calm offseason. Looks good. Stephon Diggs had an offseason hype video, but he's at Maryland working out, staying fit. There's 2 teams in that general vicinity that need a potential veteran wide receiver in the Ravens and Commanders. Liam Cohen had a really positive quote about Brenton Strange. Most of it basically makes me believe like we're going to see more snaps and routes for Brenton Strange this season, and deservedly so. 60-40 split that it's Deshaun Watson that will be the starting quarterback week 1 for the Browns. I think Shador will get a chance at some point during the season. Bretton Strange said that he wants Parker Washington to stick around, basically, and he teased a potential extension in some ways, that he was next. Seems like Bretton Strange has a really good head on his shoulders. Adam Schefter said that the 49ers are going to cut Brandon Ayuk near the start of training camp. So that's interesting, because then he's free to be on whatever team wants him. Not that any team is guaranteed to want him in any way. Ben Johnson and Colston Loveland are teaming up to do a Hallmark Channel something countdown to Christmas. Just interesting. The Browns have a completely overhauled offensive line, and so do the Texans. I think that it's very underrated that offensive line continuity is something that I think generally leads to stronger success. These two teams were both just rated very poorly on their offensive line based off of metrics that I showed earlier. And not only that, they also have low continuity. I am worried for early season stuff for those two teams at the beginning of the season. This was big. The Browns, from The Athletic, Zach Jackson. Jerry Jeudy is still the clear top receiver. I think that is just kind of debatable because it's probably just for the start of the season, especially if they end up having some other receivers that end up coming into the fold if they start losing games and they just want to get the other receivers into the fold. Denzel Boston had a strong spring, as we continually hear. And they view him as a true outside receiver and that he's going to be an immediate contributor. That's pretty big to me, because I think that him being an outside receiver means that he's likely going to stick in two wide receiver sets. And so my thought process there is like, he is probably going to be the early season value of the two rookie wide receivers for the Browns. And then the article also mentioned that Casey Conception will line up in the slot, and they're going to use him in a Malachi Corley type of role with bubble screens and design plays. Sounds very gadgety to me. They also mentioned some like deep route stuff that they might do with him. I'm a little bit concerned as to how they're going to use him. And I think early season, we may see some frustrations with Casey Conception, but by mid to end season, I think that he will just kind of play a really strong role where he's got the normal route share, normal route tree, everything, because they might like phase out Jerry Jeudy if they're losing enough games. And then Isaiah Bond is kind of competing with Casey Conception for slot and scripted deep plays. If Jerry Jeudy gets phased out, I anticipate Casey Conception being able to play that outside receiver role, and then having Isaiah Bond do the slot role, or they can rotate back and forth to see who fits in there. Again, the Parker Washington contract is kind of baselined around that Christian Watson deal. And that's everything I have. Thank you guys for tuning in to the Tight 10.